Now we're seeing a lot more pre-approvals, people out shopping, people losing on offers, and the market seems to be churning, as we were talking about a couple weeks ago, more than it was a month ago.
You're listening to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for all things Canadian real estate. And now, here are your hosts, Paul Stevenson and David Warren.
Hello and welcome back to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for all things Canadian real estate. My name is Paul Stevenson. I'm a mortgage agent level 2, and I'm here with David Warren. He's also a level 2 mortgage agent and an owner at Referral Mortgages. And we're back. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our amazing sponsors and to all our listeners. We appreciate you being here. It's been a busy month. It's been a busy week. David, how are you doing? What's going on?
Doing all right. I know both of us are not full of energy today on a gloomy day, but we'll power through this.
Hey, the third day of rain in a row. It's April, but what bothers me the most is it goes from still 0 and snowing to plus 20. Just teasing us with some heat. We actually got out to the b-ball court last week, me and the boys, and it was nice. A couple local kids came out. We got a big game going. It was just fun. It got you, feeling like summer's around the corner. And then the next day it was freezing rain and snow. So it was quite the shift.
Hey,
just a roller coaster.
But our Sens clinched. Though. So
the Sens clinched. We're very happy about that. We're back, second year in a row for the Ottawa Senators. The city is abuzz, and I think the games start. I think our first game is going to be Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think schedule's out yet, but a city will be rocking. Always a peak. Stats, Dave. Stats on the Ottawa Senators this year, good. They made the playoffs. Stats in Ottawa for real estate, also good. Okay, we got the March stats here. And one thing that I think was most surprising, I think a lot of people are hesitating to list their homes, as we talked about. I think the biggest standout here is still the days on market for me. Like, this is now March. I think in February it was 25 or 24. I don't have the numbers, but I'm pretty sure it was in the low 20s, mid 20s. So now we've come down. I mean, it has to have come down even slightly. So 21 days on market, 3 weeks on market for homes right now in Ottawa. 2,452 new listings. The benchmark price just shy of 700,000 now at 698.4. 3,500 active listings. The benchmark price for apartments is 384.7, and I believe that's come down, if I'm not mistaken, again. And then we have new listings, sales activity, and active listings fairly, I would say, on par with previous years. Nothing really stands out there to me. A little bit here, 1%, 2%. But overall, anything here that stands out, Dave, to you as far as the March numbers leading into the spring market?
Months of inventory dropping to from 3.8 months to 3.3, and then just the days on market of 21. Kind of shows that's really condensing. Again, like, it's hard. Obviously, the numbers can be. We've talked about it before. Realtors have talked about it. It can be manipulated in the sense that somebody listing, pulling it off within a couple of weeks, and then putting it back on at a lesser price point. And so that can obviously mess with those days on market. But overall, it's not every listing that's doing that. So yeah, I think that days on market being at 3 weeks is pretty interesting to me.
Yeah. And there was a few other things, like a kind of a short summary of the overall housing market, because I know the numbers can sometimes be misleading, as you mentioned. So this is a summary from the Ottawa Real Estate Board. So it's just the Ottawa's housing market is starting to wake up. March gave us the clearest sign yet that the spring market is underway. Sales are still slightly down year over year, but the gap is narrowing. We saw 1,075 homes sold in March, which is much closer to normal levels compared to earlier in the year. More importantly, the pace is improving month over month, especially in the single family segment. At the same time, inventory is rising. New listings are up about 7.5%, and active listings up over 10%. Normally, that would soften the market, but what's happening instead is that sales are keeping up with supply. And that's leading to a gradual tightening, with months of inventory dropping from 3.8 to 3.3. Pricing is just where it gets interesting. On the surface, prices look pretty flat. Average price is up just over 1% year over year, while the median is slightly down. But when you look at the MLS HPI, which adjusts for the type of homes being sold, prices have actually increased for 2 straight months. So that tells us the underlying values are starting to firm. Segment-wise, detached and townhomes are tightening faster, sitting around 3 months of inventory, while condos are still lagging with higher supply at 5.5 months. And I know that's even more staggering in certain cities over others. Overall, Ottawa is still in a balanced market, but momentum is clearly building. This is exactly what we typically see when we move into the spring. more activity, more confidence, and gradually improving conditions without things overheating. So just very like I think the HPI is showing real price growth for 2 consecutive months. Not overly surprising to me, but I think we're still not even like we're just at the precipice of the spring market. I know when Sean was on and we talked about this last week that the kind of like the seasonality of Ottawa like really dictates the market. And Easter's happened now, clocks have moved forward. That's usually like the catalyst, but it seems as though, as we talked about right at the beginning, the weather being very inconsistent up and down. I think as soon as we have that first week of consistent warm weather and sun, the market will shift. Like it always happens. And not that I think from the agents I've talked to and the realtors I've talked to, they are feeling a big pickup over the last couple of weeks. And I think, we started the year with a lot of renewal conversations, a lot of people looking to kind of restructure the mortgage. Now we're seeing a lot more pre-approvals, people out shopping, people losing on offers. And the market seems to be churning, as we were talking about a couple weeks ago, more than it was a month ago. So I think we're right on the cusp of that booming spring market. I know we keep saying this, but I do think that the weather is kind of the last hurdle we have to overcome. And April is kind of the last stretch of that crappy winter weather.
Yeah, I think weather plays a massive part in it. We've had winter drag on, like we said at the outset of the show, and it's only just starting to get better. But when you have rainy weeks, people don't want to leave their home. They're not doing open houses. They're not doing going to different listings and things like that, or people are just not wanting to book a showing or at their own home because of it being crummy weather and all of that. But I think to your point, with nicer weather, activity picks up. It'll be to be seen what that level of activity is with the overall. Still we have an economy in the gutter. We still have high unemployment rate. We still have oil prices. Things. We said last episode we were expecting a ceasefire. So oil did come down, but it's still that 10 cents off a liter still hasn't moved the needle. People are still seeing that, higher. So there's still a lot of uncertainty geopolitically that are weighing on people as well. So we'll kind of see as I think that window for the market though will be short because we've got a delayed spring market, which then moves us, we're moving that into May instead of April, and kids are out of school the end of June. So it's kind of a short window before people start taking those summer vacations and start going to cottages and things like that. There's historically we see spring be busy. Kids are in school, so parents have the time. It's nicer weather. People are kind of coming out of a hibernation. They want to get out and see things, and they want to choose somewhere before school is done so that they can plan for their summer that's not weighing on their mind, and they can start applying for, maybe that new school board or whatever it may be. But with a condensed cycle of that spring market with weather dependent, like I think we're, what it'll be, we might see it be a feverish, like May into June, for those 2 months, and then die off again, July, August being kind of those prototypical summer months where it's not as busy because people are away. That's my kind of thoughts.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I would say, April 28th to May 31st is going to be when the majority of purchases are going to happen, with closings being in July and August. Like people are going to kind of plan, okay, kids are off school. Let's get this offer in now. Let's get the closing after school's over. So we're not rushing. We have time where it's a bit more settled. Things are a bit slower. So I completely agree. Every year, there's always 1 month that just takes over the market. And, I'd say probably 60% of purchases happen in that 60-day window or 30-day window. So I think that'll be May this year. I completely agree. I think, as we see the weather pick up, everyone's going to be in a rush to get everything done prior to the summer. So I think May 1st to kind of, I said end of May, but let's say mid-June is going to be when that 6-week window is going to be when everything happens. So if you're thinking of listing your home and you're listening to this, I would say you have a 2-week window right now to get it prepared and get it on the market so you can hit that window.
And really kind of July is when Kuzma is up as well. We talked about that in previous episodes. So again, something adding to that political kind of umbrella or dark cloud, if you will, that if that doesn't get negotiated by then, which I doubt it will be, that
It won't.
that people and their jobs and the economy are going to be even in flux more so. The news is going to be extremely negative if it's not negotiated, or if something doesn't happen. it's still been over a year without tariffs being negotiated. It's kind of just gone away from the news cycle because it's kind of stopped, and that's just, we're on to the flavor of the day being oil, but nothing's moved the needle on tariffs. Nothing's been done on Kuzma. So really, if that all hits in July, again, that short window of May, June before summer hits, like you also then have that political side that people are worried about their jobs again. So I think there's going to be, again, more movement, and then a stalled market in July with summer season and with people concerned for their employment.
Yeah, and some of the other, I was reading another article this morning, just kind of getting a better pulse on the overall market across Canada. And I had some numbers nationally for home prices just to quickly touch on for kind of major cities. So national home prices are down 3% year over year. 6 of the 13 major markets are now in decline. The biggest declines, this is year over year. So Hamilton was down 8%, Victoria down 9%, Toronto 7%, which seems actually conservative in my head, Vancouver 5%. And then on the flip side, strength growth in Quebec. So Montreal saw a 9% increase, and Quebec City saw a 12% increase. Prairies slowly but still positive, around 1 and 2% in kind of the major cities in the Prairies. Condos and townhomes are seeing the biggest price drops. We've seen that kind of across Ontario, and now it seems to be national as well. And detached homes are holding value better. Are we seeing like a long-term shift where affordability markets are outperforming major cities, or is this just like a temporary reset and balancing of supply, demand, the economy? Like, what does this say to you with kind of the major cities declining, aside from Toronto obviously being in a bit of an...
I mean, Toronto, Vancouver, their condo markets are being decimated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think the numbers are skewed a bit because of the detached homes holding value in some cases, and not dropping as much. But I think with the smaller markets outperforming, typically, I think we've seen migration from a lot of the bigger cities and other areas to some of these smaller towns from an affordability standpoint, from a way of life standpoint. And I'm just kind of gaining traction as far as the growth of those cities, but kind of seeing that plateau. I don't know what industry is driving. I don't know enough about Montreal or Quebec as a whole to be able to speak on that. I don't know what is driving that 9 and 12% gain, because those are massive gains in those cities. There's got it can't just be, a migration from other provinces. There has to be an employment sector that's really causing that boom. And I'm just personally not sure of what that is, but none of the figures are surprising to me.
A very interesting conversation I had last night with kind of a random occurrence. My son, one of his tires blew up on his car. Basically, it exploded, popped completely. So we had to call CAA. They came to pick up the car. I was talking to the tow truck driver, and he was saying that, he lives in Brockville, and he said, we were just talking about the market in general, and he was just saying that during COVID, he saw so many homes between West Ottawa and basically Renfrew, like just in the kind of Lanark County area, that are completely off grid and they work from home. And he said, you wouldn't believe, like, these are like $2 million homes, mansions, people completely went off grid. And I thought that was interesting, but he was talking specifically about Kingston and how he saw the growth in Kingston just explode over the last 5 years. I think prices almost doubled there. And he was just talking about how like people that are able to move are kind of looking at these other towns that are kind of adjacent to major cities. Like there's all these kind of like intermediary cities amongst kind of the major city centers that people moved to or between kind of during the last 5 years. And that has seen all of those prices rise. So I just found it interesting that he, being someone who's not in real estate at all, and literally said like he hasn't owned a home in 20 years, like he's not in the market. He's just aware of the tendencies of people, what people are doing, how the market is reacting to just the overall affordability issue. I just thought hearing it from someone outside of the industry was quite refreshing to have that conversation.
Yeah, I'd like to meet those people that have gone completely off grid. That'd be
and how they got
interesting to hear
financing.
from them. Yeah. Banks still don't like off grid properties.
No,
They don't. They don't consider them marketable, which is kind of hilarious. But yeah.
Your home is one of your biggest investments, and the team at Big Westboro can help you protect it. Our expert brokers will find the perfect coverage to keep your home and belongings safe. Call 613-239-5792 or visit thebig.ca/Westboro for a free quote. Think big, protect what matters most. Are you trying to grow your mortgage business? Centum has the tools and support to help you take your business to the next level. Get access to everything from free unlimited custom marketing to daily direct pay. Find out what your business can do with Centum. Learn more at joincentum.ca. Are you thinking of buying or selling a residential property? Relationships are at the heart of every real estate transaction at Gertin-Poirier Avocat Lawyers. We love to bring residential buyers, sellers, agents, lenders, mortgage brokers, and the law together to close the deal for you for an effortless client experience that opens doors. Call us at 613-744-4488 or visit our website at gertinpoirierlaw.ca. Let's get to the heart of your deal. Even the best photographer can't hide drywall dust and paint splatter. And every day you delay listing could mean missing peak spring pricing in Ottawa. A to Z Cleaning Expert gets your property truly photo ready. Don't risk going to market half ready. Mention TowRep at atozcleaningexpert.com to receive priority scheduling for your next listing.
I mean, kind of on the vehicle or on the cars topic, there was a couple of comments on our last episode kind of referencing vehicles and transportation, and kind of,
Yes,
which is interesting, in the sense that, this is from, I think, Bicharon, that government's saying we need to impose carbon taxes to discourage environmental pollution, yet they're forcing people to pollute the environment, especially in a city that has insufficient public transportation like Ottawa, is a real reason that the government are imposing back to office 4 and soon to be 5 days a week, because there's looking for more tax revenue, fuel consumption. What's that driver there? Kind of talking about people living in those tertiary markets, that kind of commuting in, or is it playing into those early retirement incentives, being that they gave a July to apply for early retirement incentives, which also aligns with that return to office 4 and 5 days, which in Ottawa will be very interesting because LRT East-West is still not operable. It's still not out of the testing phase.
we're almost there, Dave. We're on track. We're on track, on time.
Major construction starting. I think 2 of the bridges to Gatineau, where a lot of people live, will be commuting, but I believe 2 of the bridges are closing, down to basically a single lane. I think one's closing completely and the other down to like single lane or during rush hour, maybe 2, but either way, obviously be a disaster. So it certainly will be interesting to see how that plays into things. But for that, kind of bringing it back to that comment about people moving outside of the major cities, how this might change that perspective of people, whether there's any sort of movement in needing to come back. We saw that during COVID at the early outset, that people, we had both you and I had clients that bought outside the city because they were told, basically you could work from home and you're not going to have to come back to the office.
Drive till you can buy.
Shopify closed their head office, said you won't need to be back in. They haven't mandated that, but there's a lot of companies that have started, mandating to be back to the office. But with this government, this is the first time that we've had this. It's been 5 years now. If they wanted to do this, they should have done it years before instead of letting it go 5 years. This is a long cycle to let people, transition their lives of moving to a different city, kind of work schedule, life schedule, things like that. So I think over those a couple of months, to Bicharon's comments, like, the political comments aside, just it'll be interesting to see how people kind of move within the city or from outside the city in, and whether that affects any of the sales on like in the core more or closer to town, or whether the condo market picks up at all. There's, like we talked about, there's 5.5 months of inventory. Like, does that start pushing a little bit more because those people that are, maybe couples or single individuals that are living outside the city, like needing to be in to cut down their commute time, so that they're not relying on a non-functioning LRT system as of yet.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that kind of will all play into that July deadline.
Yes. Well, one area actually of Ottawa, I'm not in Ottawa as much or as frequently anymore, but I was there last week. And one of the really neat developments that I thought kind of piqued my interest was at LeBreton Flats. They built the new records office, or historical records, I think it is, or
library,
archive, and a beautiful building. But beside that, they have 2 or 3 towers that they're putting in kind of right near the LRT there. So I think like there are a lot of really interesting projects happening, it seems, across the city. But at the same time, there's seems to be a lot of confusion and still a lack of affordability and supply. Like it's funny when you were mentioning that because we're so like we have such short memories as humans. Like we kind of forget that just 4 years ago, we literally had like a drive till you can buy, meme, or that was kind of like the sentiment of listen, the market's too hot in the city. Just drive as far, like start driving outside the city and find the price point that you can afford and buy there, and that also drove up, Russell and Limoges and like all these kind of Carleton Place, for example, was like one of the fastest growing towns in Canada. I think the fastest for,
Yeah.
a year or something during that time frame. So there was just this understanding of like, okay, you can't afford here. That's fine. We'll just start driving and we'll find a town that we can afford and we'll buy there. And that kind of caused a lot of people to move outside the city. I think the comment from Bicheron was directed specifically at our conversation last week about in the UK having a mandate for people to stay home, to work
Yeah.
from home, to save on that carbon. And in Canada, which is probably the most carbon focused country as far as their talking points and carbon tax and everything else, is telling workers to go back to the office and drive. And like you said, like, what's the incentive there? Why are they doing that? How is it so contradictory to what they were preaching to all of us less than 2-3 years ago of, like how hard do they push the carbon tax and how hard do they push less use of carbon and fossil fuels? And here we are forcing people to go back to the office. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying have some consistency. You know what I mean? Like you can't say one thing and then completely contradict it with a mandate or a policy. So I just wish there was some consistency, David. Give us some direction and let us run that way for a bit before giving us a full 180.
I mean, fortunately, you and I aren't in the federal government, so
I
I
can
feel
walk
bad.
to the office.
I do feel bad
My carbon footprint is small.
for those that are. It does
Mhm.
make them have to decide, and to Sharon's point, it's they're having to decide whether kind of take either of those early retirement, move their family, or decide to sit in traffic for 2 to 3 hours a day, and those are
Yeah, I
very
mean, I have
difficult
family
decisions.
that works downtown, and kind of near train yards, and it just even scheduling wise, with the kids and just school drop offs and athletics and everything else, like it creates chaos. And like if you, I mean, I would say from a work life balance standpoint, and someone who's worked in an office 8 to 4 and has also worked from home and had my own office, etc. Like being able to manage your time efficiently has no bearing on your your productivity. Like you can be extremely productive at home if you're structured and you're disciplined, Now, are there going to be outliers that take advantage of that time? Of course, but there's also people that go to the office and take hour-long washroom breaks and go get a coffee for 45 minutes. Like it happens everywhere. So it doesn't matter if they're at home or at the office, but if you can be productive, like from a work-life balance standpoint, I think it's much more effective and better for the overall footprint to not be sitting in traffic for 2 hours a day just to appease, a mandate, essentially.
Well, we'll see if anything changes over the next couple of months, especially now with a newly formed majority government. We'll see what sort of changes kind of come in this spring announcement, and after majority, kind of what changes in that regard, if anything, what changes with employment figures with the federal government. There's a lot that now can change because of just being a majority.
I mean, it will change. I mean, that's the whole. You would have to assume if people are crossing the aisle and they're, courting, like openly courting conservative MPs to cross the aisle, there's got to be a plan. There's something obviously that they're planning to implement or that they want to implement to get that, like to have that majority to do it. So it'll be interesting to see what comes down the pipe. I would say, like, honestly, we were reading articles earlier today. I didn't see a single headline about this. So I would say the majority of Canadians don't even know this has happened yet. So if you're hearing it here first, the Liberals now have a majority government, and there will probably be some changes coming in the coming months. So
Yeah. Well,
stay tuned. We will be bringing it to you.
On that note, should we slide into some mood boosts?
Yes, of course. Yeah. I have three today. Number one, my roommate says I've gained weight, but in my defense, I've had a lot on my plate lately. Celebration of taste, Mandarin. Number two, my wife threatened to divorce me if I gave our daughter a silly name, so I called her bluff. And number three, my three favorite things are eating my family and not using commas.
Wow.
There you go. There you go.
Wow.
There's the boost for the week. There's the boost for the day. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors. And be sure to follow us on our socials. And we'll be back next week, 10 a.m. Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Deuces.